Okay, so what I think I should do first of all is introduce you a little bit
Right.
by you having an opportunity, Alexandra, to let us know a little bit about you and a little bit about what your major focus is and how you do that. What is it that you do, Alexandra?
So what I do is really I help people detox their body and find health and wellness and regeneration of the body through detoxification. But that's kind of really only what I do on the surface, because ultimately what I do is I show people how to transform their lives to a point where their lives become filled with excitement and joy, and where people are living really their ultimate truth. Because the majority of people, and this is sort of a phrase that I took from one of my first proper teachers and mentors. He used to say, Alex, those people where the lights are on but nobody's home. And I'd say, yes. Is that what you call it?
I
And
like what you said and what you brought up there a lot. I like what you said. You're really like you're a detoxification expert and a coach for that process. But by helping people go through the process, you're helping them integrate their entire lives. That the
exactly.
spill off and the spillover from all of that is joy, happiness, love, peace, energy,
Fulfillment.
and that spills over into the entire life. And
Absolutely.
that's exactly been my experience as well with the detoxification process. For 30 years as a professional trainer, I was always eating too much protein, animal protein specifically, and telling thousands of people to do that as well too. And that's one of the biggest motivators for me to really try now to help people to heal themselves from this, because I was, played such a role in helping other people to fill themselves with disease as well as myself.
Yeah.
But now that I have healed or begun the healing process through detoxification, I've seen the spillover of increased energy, increased emotional joy and happiness, like more love to give, more consideration of others, just an all-round happier feeling in my entire life. So although the detoxification process is supposed to just, be about the elimination of organic and inorganic elements that are not supposed to be inside of our bodies, by
Right.
removing them, we actually eliminate the blockage that we have with the infinite energy source that is within each of us, and when that happens, we get a freedom and an energy access that is beyond anything we've ever had before.
Absolutely. I mean, that to me is really always the most mind-blowing thing. And I in many ways, yes, I started out in nutrition 20 years ago, but simultaneously I've been on this massive journey of whatever you want to call it, spiritual development.
Myself
And
also, yes, for many, many years,
yeah,
15, 17, 18 years, I've been on a spiritual journey, and I didn't know how to bring my career and my spiritual journey together, and
exactly.
detoxification did that for me, is where I saw the uniting of both ends of my life, and that's how I knew for sure that I was on the right track, because everything all of a sudden just converged very rapidly.
Absolutely. That was my experience too. I kept living in these two worlds. One was the real world, which obviously is so not real.
Yes.
And the other was the spiritual world, and they kept colliding, and I kept going back and forth.
And I loved the spiritual world, but I couldn't understand how to integrate it into my life and how to make it a part of my life.
Completely, I hear you. I mean, that's why I even went to the point to when I came to South Africa 14 years ago, and I was managing spas and opening health spas for other people. I thought to myself on the plane here, I even wrote it in my journal just to make sure. I said, I shall not partake in any spiritual process work or any spiritual groups. I'm just going to concentrate on my work, because all the spiritual stuff keeps colliding with my real life. And so I vowed when I came here that I will not do any of that. And of course, to no avail, because 3 months later, I was in the midst of my most radical spiritual transformation. But I always like telling that story because I wrote it very seriously in my journal. And
That's very
Spirit
funny.
was like, what are you doing? Who are you kidding?
Very
You are Spirit itself.
Yes, this is it. This is it. So that's wonderful. So we've established that the purification, the detoxification process is a lot more than just eating more live food and eating fruit. It's a deeper thing than that. That may be the physical, mechanical component. It is a two-step process of combining the powerful healing effects of fasting, along with the incredible healing effects of eating live plant-based nutrition, focusing on the most astringent fruits and high hydration fruits. So it's a combination of these two things. The fasting really, especially dry fasting, really helps us to connect most deeply, I find, with that spiritual part of ourself. When we're not digesting food, when we're not in the throes of hormonal response to food, we can notice the subtle communication that's going on probably all of the time with that deep spiritual energy that's inside of us.
Yes, I always like to say our bodies are actually tuning forks, highly evolved tuning forks.
Excellent.
And so we do inevitably, as we know from the great masters, the great sages that have lived throughout the times, we know what we are capable of. And so for me, that was actually, in my journey, eventually I realized, well, if those great sages were capable of doing those various things, and if they were able to attune themselves to a certain energy, then they were human, I am human. There is no difference between me and them. There is no difference between me and Jesus, for that matter.
Exactly. I love that. I love that. And that seems to make the most sense. And we have no idea, but I mean, what's so funny you said that. What's been coming into my mind just over the last 24 hours is that Jesus healed people, but maybe he was healing them with live food and fasting, and the story has been embellished into him healing them by, just by touching them. And I don't know anything about this. This is just a thought that just insightful
Absolutely.
Thought that just came up inside of me, that he was a healer. Maybe he was healing people using live natural foods, but the story has been altered. I don't know.
Well, also, we heal by raising people's frequencies And we do that with words, really. I mean, yes, our hands, you know, like I have studied Reiki and I've done energy
Healing
healing.
energy with the hands, yes. Energy healing, very possible. Another alternative method of...
But the word, when he says first was the word, and that is why it is so important to become aware of how we speak. And so often, you know, most people, they speak and they have no awareness of the words that they use. And when with our word is we spell, we cast spells with our words. So when I say, oh well, I'm such a complicated woman, you know, which a lot of women love to say, well, if you say that, then you will become it and you will be it and you will create complication for yourself because you like to think of yourself as complicated, or, you know, whatever our spell may be.
You know,
Whatever we like
the
to.
words carry vibration, right? And those vibrations
Hugely.
tune our bodies. Every single cell of our bodies are tuned by the vibration that we're speaking, that's tone that's coming up through our bodies.
Absolutely. And on the contrary, when I work with people and my focus is with my words to raise their vibration, to speak to their higher selves, because we all respond, you know, we all knew as children that we were unique, magical beings that had a unique, particular gift that we brought into this universe. And the delight that we did or most often did not receive from our parents about our beauty and gift, that is our deepest wounding. So the fact that we as children, and most of us have experienced that, you know, we knew the magic that we carried, but it wasn't seen. And when maybe we wanted to bring it out, we wanted to have it seen, we were dismissed. And that dismissal is everybody's biggest wounding. And at the same time, it's our biggest opportunity to go there, to go back into that wounding and to remember who we were, because actually that's all it is. It's a remembering who you were as a divine being in this world, and that we are all capable of absolute infinite magic.
I love
and
that.
By speaking to people and allowing them to remember it, we call it out and we remember, we reassemble ourselves to our original vibration and emanation. And we all have that magical vibration and emanation. It will differ to each one of us. And so for me, that is really the other magical process of this detoxification. And detoxification is really nothing but stripping away everything that is not real. Everything that is not real, that is not true and serving, needs to be stripped away. And for many people, that can be a scary process because, you know, some come to me and they say, well, I just want to feel good. And they don't want to address the points of pain and dis-ease that are running their lives, which in many cases is their broken relationships. And
yes, I like that a lot. You know, I often share a story that that I always bump into this person every single year, and it's always a client that seemingly is exercising properly and eating properly, but not getting the results that they want. And you know, this year I had a lady that was having this exact same problem. She had been exercising with me and seemingly eating right for 2 or 3 months and not getting any results. And then all of a sudden she started to make some changes in her life. And as I started to see her dropping 3, 4, 5 pounds the first month, and again the second month, and again the third month, I said to her, you know, after she was down 20 pounds, you know, what changed? And she shared that there was some major change in her in her decision to leave her relationship. And as soon as she had made that decision, that, you know, things started to change, and she made that connection. And I always like to tell people that we are so much more than maybe just our personal goals, right? We are
Absolutely.
also, you know, the goals that we have in our relationships with our primary partner, in our relationships with our parents or our children or our closest friends, our relationship with our careers, our relationship with our finances, our future, our adventure, the things that we want to do, and our contribution back to the whole, our relationship to the entire planet. And if we're holding or harboring any hate or anger or resentment or frustration towards anybody else or any other culture or any other race or any other sex on the planet, that harboring of negative emotion and feeling that we're putting out or holding against anyone else comes back to us. And so, you know, the way that we're feeling and thinking and addressing all aspects of our life affect us. And we may not be able to get that goal of feeling good or losing weight or overcoming pain until we manage that relationship or that thought that's incorrect in some other part of our life. It's not just a single, you know, I want to lose weight or I want to feel good. We've got to explore all aspects of the self in order to heal perhaps something that you think is just food or exercise related.
Absolutely. I mean, I see that especially with the people that I work with that have chronic diseases or autoimmune issues, which, I mean, all of that, I went through it. And that's the only reason why I'm doing what I'm doing is because I have lived all of it. I've lived addiction. I have lived periods of my life where I just, no matter what I was doing, I just couldn't heal. I couldn't get the results. And so it's through the own pain, you know, that I came to this. And finally, after a lot of trial and error and sweat and tears, but ultimately persistence, because I knew the hook had to be somewhere.
Right. Right. That, you know, there had to be a solution to, you know, why I'm following the traditional or mainstream approach and not getting the result. There has to be a happy, healthy life that's available to us. I know that there are people that have accomplished it. You know, what am I missing? I was always open and searching. In fact, when I came across the work of Dr. Arnold Ehret, I was very actively opening and asking myself, asking the universe, asking for the answers inside of myself to, you know, what is missing? What do I need to learn? What do I need to know? I was asking for those answers when I received the information.
Yes. Yeah, and I believe that this information is ultimately, you know, through people like you and me and many others like us, it is coming out, and that health is actually, it's far simpler than science and medicine has led us to believe, or that even science believes itself. Because I always say, you know, it's not that the doctors are out there to get us. I mean, there's, you know, a lot of people into conspiracy theory. That's not me. You know, I believe they really are genuinely all trying to do their best. It's just the whole system approaches it from a completely wrong angle. And that is actually, you know, it's interesting. Just a few months ago, I came across some readings that pointed out that medicine, up until somewhere the early 1900s, I believe, was, you know, the doctor was also the astrologer, and he was also your priest. So he was doctor, priest, astrologer. And meaning he looked at the whole persona, right? He looked at the physical, he looked at the spiritual, and he looked at the shamanic, if you will. And that all those elements had to come together. And then it was actually Hippocrates who went and separated the magic, the spirit, the spiritual from the physical. And that is really when medicine started. Modern medicine started with Hippocrates saying, let's forget about the spiritual and the mystical, the mysterious, and let's purely focus on the physical. And that's when things started going wrong.
That's interesting information, because I mean, Hippocrates was the grandfather of modern medicine, and Hippocrates said a lot of incredibly profound things that I feel that modern medicine has drifted away from. And if you do look at the words and statements of Hippocrates, you know, he said a lot of things that indicated that, you know, food was the main source of all illness and the way that we need to look to heal ourselves. And he
Correct.
really put all of the power to heal within the person, and seemingly that all disease was something that could be corrected, you know, from his information and from his teaching. So I'm really surprised that you've shared that today about his involvement in the separation of spirit and medicine. You know,
well, that's
they
that's
must converge, I think, for healing to happen.
Yes, because I have seen patients, you know, who've come to me with a perfect diet, with a perfect exercise plan, and they weren't healing. What were they doing wrong? And there again, ultimately, it's because on a soul level, on a soul and mind level, they were not allowing, in this particular case, the one person I'm thinking about, he wasn't allowing the goodness in his life to actually touch his heart. So his heart was so shut down that there was this armor all around him. And his issue was he could not pick up any weight. And, you know, when you look at all the information there, it's simply he did not let anything in on an emotional level. And so no matter how much he was eating good stuff and doing all the right stuff, nothing was actually feeding his soul.
Interesting. Now that's really interesting. You're talking about maybe the heart chakra. Do you work with chakra? Do you talk about the chakra?
I do.
Yes, you know, like I haven't done a ton of chakra research, but what I do like about the chakra is that it talks about, you know, different levels of awareness of energy, and I really like intentionally trying to lift energy up from my root, and I find the chakra is the most clear kind of thought way to intellectualize energy kind of coming up from down low, and energy coming from the root and being lifted up. And I always like to encourage people to realize that we do have that infinite source energy deep inside of us, and with the intention first thing in the morning, with movement and intention, we can lift that energy up through us. And I really like that what you said. He wasn't allowing it into his heart. He wasn't allowing himself to feel. So his emotional body was lacking a little bit of feeling and energy and vibration to enter it, and he was blocking that because of a thought. Would you say?
Yes, because of a thought, and a thought ultimately ends up having influence on especially on our hormones and gland secretions, as well as digestive process. So, for example, you know, I mean, we all know that when we get fearful or anxious, what happens? Our stomach closes down.
Digestion is altered.
Exactly. And that is because when we are in fear, the body is trying to be on high alert. And
fight or
then
flight.
Exactly. And so there is no energy, literally, there is no energy to be spent on digestion.
Right. All the blood is shunted to the peripheral muscles in order to run away or to fight.
Yes. And so, for example, when we have, children who then obviously become adults, but as children that have had, trauma in their family, and it doesn't necessarily, we always think trauma is big things, like rape or abuse or whatever. Trauma can simply be being raised in a family where the child did not get the attention and the love and the support that it needed. And many of us have grown up with that.
Haven't we all grown up in some dysfunction of some kind, because no parent was perfect, myself included. And so we repeat that. But then we always have a choice in order to continue with our dysfunction or awaken ourselves to it and choose to create something different.
Yes, but often that choosing is very hard, because like in my case, I had so much trauma stored in my body that my body was actually constantly running on high alert. And on one hand, that enabled me, and still it has given me the capacity to be highly intuitive and to really constantly feel all the energies that are happening with people and situations. And so that's where my intuition, my high intuition comes from. But on the other hand, I have had to learn to actually release through trauma release and various other methods, to physically release all the adrenaline that has been stored in my body for so many years, and to actually drive my body back down into the parasympathetic nervous system.
So I like what you've brought up there. So sometimes we can have traumatic events, problems, situations, circumstances that cause deep stress, especially perhaps if we were early in life. And you're suggesting that sometimes we cannot even access or heal that because it's kind of trapped energy, and so we can't even really make the choice to work beyond that or work outside of that until we've done something in order to remove or release that energy that is blocked. And
Yes.
and so some sort of like counseling, I guess you're suggesting. What methods are you suggesting that are potential solutions?
I find counseling is limited, because it's, again, everything that goes through the mind. Most of us are already so mind driven and mind focused that I've encountered people who can talk the talk of spirituality and self-development, but it's not embodied because they have not done the work to embody it. And so what I mostly like to work with is trauma release. On one hand, I do fascia massage, so I actually work on the body to
physically removing it by massaging it. Okay,
yes.
Excellent.
And then as we massage, emotions come up, and so then we work with those emotions. And oftentimes, people on the massage table can literally, have coughing fits or almost feel like they're going to retch, because it is such a deep physical experience. And then we also do TRE, which is more of an exercise where you allow the body to shake, just like the animals do in nature. So you literally shake off the trauma, and I teach people how to do that so that they can do that at home as well. And breath work is another way to access deep stuck emotions in the body. And then ultimately, I work also very deeply one-on-one with people with sacred medicines, because those also allow the surfacing of oftentimes memories and traumas that we have absolutely no recollection of.
Okay, so now you're talking about plant medicine.
Yes.
So I mean, I've had some experience with, of course, well, marijuana, of
Yeah.
course, here, very common in North America. But then also, I went to Peru a couple of years ago, year and a half ago, to drink the ayahuasca, which
Yeah.
is another plant medicine. Um, can you first, before you get into talking about the plant medicine a little bit, let me just first notify everyone that Alexandra lives in South Africa.
Yes.
So some of the things that you're accessing there are a little different than what we have available and accessible to us here. Um, you can probably clarify that a little bit more, but I just wanted to let people know that yes, that I'm in Toronto, Canada, and Alexandra is in South Africa, and it is 8 a.m. here, and it's to
2 p.m.
2 p.m. in the afternoon there, so a little bit of a time difference here. Yes, please continue. Plant medicine. Could you please first talk to me a little bit about marijuana and ayahuasca,
Yes.
just because of those, I have had experience with those too.
Yes, yes. So yeah, I mean, I found my way to plant medicines after really having most of my youth, spent as the classical goody that never took anything. And also because I never really did well with alcohol or any of the other stuff.
I didn't never did well with alcohol either, or caffeine. Have both been acidic for me and problematic for me my whole life.
Yeah. And so when I was suffering from an eating disorder for 20 years and I tried everything under the sun to try and heal it, I finally actually started reading about plant medicines and about their effects. And so that is what opened me up to the possibility. And in the meantime, I've done deep work with all the plant medicines for the last 12 years.
Amazing.
And
Before you go further, I really want to just touch on one thing that comes to mind immediately. Like you said, you had, you were a goody, and you never had experience with substance of any kind. So I just want to touch on that, because I do feel that a lot of people do get judgmental whenever you start talking
yes,
about this. How do you address people's kind of thought of drugs? And it's kind of silly, because I know lots of people are using medication for antidepressant. They're using medication for sleep, and they're using medication for acid reflux. So they're doing all sorts of things in their life that are creating unhealth and disease in their body. But because their doctor said it was okay for them to take this medication, it's okay. It's okay. But it's a drug if it comes from someone, some recommendation from someone like yourself, a health
yeah,
professional
yeah.
of a different kind.
Yes. Yeah, look, I had that same judgment initially, so I completely understand how people, can have that judgment. And when I work with people, I mean, generally they look at me, they look at my life, and they see that, well, okay, if she's taking it, if she's proposing it, there must be something else to it. So
So
most people,
yeah, we can't get caught up too much in other people's judgments, can we? Really? Like, I mean,
right, right.
the people that are open and willing to learn from you will come and gravitate towards you and learn from you and gain from what you're sharing with the world. And the people that
Yes.
just aren't open to learn from you, don't want to learn from you, don't like you, don't like what you're doing, don't have your vibration, aren't attracted to you, they just won't listen and are not interested. And we really probably shouldn't focus too much on the people that aren't interested. They'll just move on to the side.
Right. And I've also learned that, it can be dangerous to try and convince people, because if they are not ready, they become your responsibility. And so, I'm always very careful nowadays. It's if they're not open, then that's totally fine. They may be open in 6 months' time or in a year's time, or never, and that's all fine.
That's their choice. That's everybody's choice. Everybody has choice, and that's our, most human thing is to have choice. So, we don't want to take choice away from anybody. Any of the ideas that we're sharing are always just ideas that we have done with our research, our own self independently. And if anyone wants to choose to do anything that we're talking about, that's their own responsibility and their choice to pursue and move in that direction.
Correct. But having said that, I have found, when I started 12 years ago with the sacred medicines, I had to be very careful who I spoke to about them. And it was still very much regarded as, you're doing drugs. Whereas nowadays, certainly in the last 5-6 years, and increasingly so, there are more and more doctors, more and more health practitioners that are really open to working with them and that have found huge benefits in working with them. In fact, I believe in Canada, you have Dr. Gabor Mate, who is world renowned, and he's an addiction expert, really quite an amazing man. And he has worked extensively with ayahuasca and addiction.
In Canada?
Yes, I believe he is in Canada. Yeah.
And he's mixing that up here, like he has the ingredients to do that.
As far as I know, he used to serve it in Canada until he kind of, started getting sort of reprimanded for it, and now he doesn't use it in Canada, but he now uses it, I think maybe in South America. He
sets up retreats to go down and engage. Okay, wonderful. Yes. That's what I found is that ayahuasca, knowing that it's such a specific plant and a specific vine, and it must be combined in such a very specific way and boiled in such a specific way. It was only the shamans in South America that I knew that were doing that, and I don't believe that is accessible here in Canada. Not that I know of.
Right. I do think it is best to experience, especially ayahuasca, with proper shamans in South America, definitely. But on the other hand, we have a lot of other plant medicines, sacred medicines available to us. And certainly cannabis and marijuana is one of the most powerful and most sacred medicines. And for many years, I stayed away from it because it has such a negative connotation. It's sort of, we all know the connotations.
Yes.
And so I stayed away from it until I learned that it's very different when you consume it smoked versus when you take the oil, the actual
tincture,
oil.
The tincture. Excellent.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay.
Very different vibration. So again, it's what we do. It's a little bit like, there's a difference between eating raw food versus cooked food.
Yes.
And so when we smoke cannabis, there is a chemical process that happens that is not as beneficial as when we either vape it or when we take the oil, when we ingest the oil, or you can even juice the leaves. And juicing the leaves has absolutely no psychedelic or no effect, but it has deep healing effects on the body. So it's very, very good to juice it.
Excellent. Great.
Yeah. On the other hand, taking the oil, for example, I find is extremely helpful for people with anxiety. And, there's people who, when they inhale it with the vaping or when they take the drops, they will have a lot of paranoia coming up. And so a lot of people will say, oh, it doesn't work for me. It's not good for me. It doesn't help me. And to the contrary, I say it is working for you. It is basically because what teacher plants do, they bring to the surface that which is blocked inside of you, but that is unconscious to you normally. right?
Interesting. Interesting.
So we tend to then blame the sacred plants for making us feel uncomfortable. But actually, I always say there is nothing that any sacred medicine can bring up or out of you that is not already present in your subconscious. And that is really the big healing property of the plant. So for example, when people react with paranoia and fear when they ingest cannabis, then I teach them to work with that. Instead of avoiding the plant, is like, no, go there. The plant is simply showing you where is your blockage.
I see. I see. So these people are anxious and paranoid, but maybe that energy is being suppressed
Yeah,
to maintain their social mask or get through their day.
exactly.
However, they have this deep rooted, like,
Yes. So that's what I found. There is these plants can never bring something up that is not already in you. And so if it's in you, then I teach my clients, let's work with it. As scary as it is, as difficult as it is, as uncomfortable as it can be, let's go there. And then I show them how by going there and facing their deepest, darkest, most uncomfortable feelings, we can retrieve parts of themselves that have simply been shut down. And I see that, funny enough, a lot of times with very successful men.
mm,
So you will see the financially successful man
yes,
who is very powerful and very confident, apparently, in the outward world. But typically, a lot of them, they have not great, deeply satisfying relationships. And they have areas in their lives where they are not deeply satisfied. Usually it's actually in relationships.
yes.
And those are the men that when we work with sacred teacher plants, a lot of deep, dark stuff comes up.
Interesting. So marijuana is one of the plants that you use. Cannabis is one of the plants that you use, or
Yes.
what other plants do you use, and what plants do you tend to gravitate to as favorite plants, and what for what reasons, and for what?
Right. So then I also work with psilocybin, which are the so-called magic mushrooms. And psilocybin is incredible also at bringing up trauma, at allowing people to feel their deepest traumatic experiences that again rule their lives unconsciously. So it makes the unconscious conscious. And I mean, with all these sacred medicines, we only use them in sacred settings. It's never done recreationally. There's always a really powerful container that I and my husband create for people. And more often than not, we work together with a clinical psychologist as well. So we've got a team of 3 of us that work together, either one-on-one, or sometimes we do deep couple work as well, because it works incredibly well for couple therapy.
For
And
relationships, for relationships.
yes.
So as in both people in the relationship will ingest the
Right.
psilocybin, and
Yeah.
then they're like in, I guess, a heightened state. Is it an emotional thing? Is it a
Yes, typically they're able to access their deepest emotion. Oftentimes they even go back to literally childhood or even to infancy. Like, for example, we had a man that was abandoned by his mother at the age of 6 months. The mother left for 2 weeks, and the baby who was being breastfed, for the baby, it was like all of a sudden the food was gone and the mother was gone. So as a baby in that state of consciousness, it was as if he was dying, right? The mother left, the breast left, the food left, and it was death. And so when he took the mushrooms, he went back to a state when he was 6 months old, and he literally became this terrified infant that thought he was dying. And by going back, and obviously it was very, very scary, but we hold people in that space and allow them to re-feel the feelings, because you can only heal something when you feel it. So if you feel it, you can heal it. And oftentimes it's not even so much about deeply processing and going over and over the trauma. It's simply feel it. Feel what that little 6-month-old boy must have felt. Can you feel the desperation? Can you now...
Suppressed emotion, suppressed energy. It's trapped, and it needs to come out and be brought to the light, brought to attention. It needs to be addressed. You have to feel it. You've got to get into it. You've got to become aware of it. You've got to really put it on the table, and then you find that after bringing it to the surface like that the person can move beyond it. Is that?
Generally, the healing, that is where the healing starts. Because oftentimes, like in that case, and obviously the younger the wound happens, the more complex and kind of severe it is, because it has so many repercussions. So in this man's case, his whole life has been filtered through that filter of terror of being abandoned. So can you see how, if that is my filter that I live my life through, it literally, everything that I do, every relation that I have, every interaction that I have,
playing out all of the time. It's playing out. It's involved in every single part of my life now.
Exactly.
So now I'm addressing that with an understanding in all of my relationships that I've come into this relationship with this kind of mentality, and now I probably need to adjust the way that I've been reacting and acting and thinking and speaking in all of my relationships with that new awareness now.
Completely. So that is where the work, the deep work, needs to be done, and that's why the healing, it starts there and then it sort of continues. And that's why we coach and we accompany people throughout their process and see what all needs to be done, so that we basically, it's really a rewiring of our innermost, and so that we can free ourselves and go back to our original true emanation that we were before the trauma. And at the same time, we can also start seeing how that trauma has also served us, because everything always serves. Nothing is ever in vain. And so that's also important to see, is that, okay, we have been wounded, but the wounding has given us a gift. And so I always like to say, the gold is in the shit. And if we start unpacking our shit, if we have the willingness to get our hands dirty and to start digging in there, and instead of turning away from it, we turn towards it, we will always find incredible richness, incredible gold, incredible power that we can access when we fully see the whole picture. And then we can turn our weakness into our power.
Excellent. So what other plant medicines do you use then? And how do you determine which plant you're going to use, or for what situation?
Right. So another plant that we work with, which is actually, it's a root bark, it's called iboga, and it's really indigenous to West Africa. And it's used by the Bwiti tribes as an initiation, as a sacred initiation. And it's I would say it's the most powerful psychedelic plant, because it acts as a complete reset. And it's used in the States as well for addiction. It's mainly known for countering heroin addiction or any severe addiction. but that is because it is a complete resetter. So it completely resets your neurotransmitters. And it's a little bit like hitting reset on a computer and wiping the whole motherboard clean and starting afresh. And it's definitely
so
not something.
do you use that with everybody, or just?
No. Iboga is definitely one of those plants that I would only use for somebody that is deeply, deeply, deeply stuck the way that I was.
Right.
Where you almost come to a point where you actually would rather die than continue the life that you are living, because you are so stuck in your matrix.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's not for everybody. And at the same time, I mean, it's such a powerful, sacred teacher that when you are ready for it and ready for also the aftermath, then it can be it's like having a new life. It really is.
So people are coming to you then for learning the detoxification process. And being coached through that, so they're now getting empowered to heal themselves with their food and their fasting, and you're teaching and coaching them through that. And then any emotional blocks or traumatic events that come up that tend to be blocking them from moving forward, that's when you'll introduce potentially one of the sacred medicines that may be helpful in helping them to go a little bit further into their detoxification process and help them heal a little bit further.
Yes, obviously, I mean, we use other steps like process work as well before.
Massage,
not everybody's ready immediately for sacred plant medicine work, and not everybody needs to.
Yes.
But the sacred plant medicines are definitely also, they're not just working on the emotions, but what's amazing about them is that they also work deeply on the physical. So they do help the physical detoxification. And you will know, ayahuasca makes you rich, and also go to the bathroom.
Yes.
There. And so typically, we know that most people are riddled with parasites. I mean, that's another thing that most people don't speak about.
Yes. And those parasites, those living beings inside of us are affecting our emotions, are affecting our thoughts.
Hugely. And it's so vastly underestimated, the damage. And it's actually, in many ways, I mean, it's subtle damage, because we don't realize it, how damaging the parasites are to our whole being. True. And even things like candida, we speak of candida consciousness, because those people that are riddled with candida, they have a certain level of consciousness that actually, it's like a self-feeding mechanism. The candida keeps you in the candida consciousness, and because you are in the candida consciousness, which is kind of like a bit of a lackadaisical, powerless, it's not an empowered way of being, and because you operate from that way of being, that then self-feeds the candida loop once more.
I see. So you stay trapped in it because it's you're collecting that same vibration that's drawing more of that type of lifestyle and those choices and those opportunities and circumstances back to yourself.
Yes, it's a very disempowered way of being, and the majority of people, as much as they can seem successful on the outside, are not sovereign, empowered, free beings. And you and I, and many like us, we are really here to wake people up to the fact that it is our birthright to be sovereign, and that real life and real participation in the process of life, which is the greatest invitation that we have all by being alive, is to become sovereign. Because being sovereign is not an end. Being sovereign is when life truly starts. Until then, you are not living, you are surviving. right?
I mean, please explain your definition of sovereign. Is like sovereign is like thriving. Sovereign is like living
Well,
your life to your fullest. Is it's being a self mastery. It's in control of your circumstances. Well, how do you
yes,
define?
I would say being sovereign is being fully aware that you are infinitely powerful and that you actually are in charge of everything that is part of your reality.
Taking
So
full
being sovereign,
responsibility. I love that. Yes.
being sovereign does not mean that in every moment of your life you are joyful and radiating, beauty and success. It's not about that. Being sovereign, you're still going to be hit with the shit that happens in life, but the shit hits you differently, whereas when you're not sovereign, you go, oh my goodness, what have I done? Or poor me, or how am I going to get out of this? When you're sovereign, it's like, oh, I wonder how I created this.
And you step up to it and you embrace it and you understand that it's to help you. It's to teach you something. It's something you need to learn in order to move forward to the next stage of your existence.
Exactly,
Very
exactly. It
nice,
doesn't
very
leave
nice.
you as a victim. It leaves you as, oh, I'm ready for the next stage of mastery. Like one of my teachers, he said, when the house burns down, when you're in he calls it in third dimension and you're not sovereign, you go, oh shit, oh my goodness, what now? And what a tragedy. And when you're sovereign, you go, oh, how did that just happen?
Right.
But you keep your joy and excitement about life because you know that life is constantly working for you and never against you, no matter
Right.
what.
Right. So a lot of the time we perceive that something terrible has happened or something negative has happened. Um, it never is truly something negative. It's always exactly what we needed to get or have in order to actually move forward in the direction that we want to go.
Yes, well, in the direction that our soul also is calling us towards. And that's where then I believe it's so important to, if that is our calling, to be integrated in our soul's calling.
And I always like to talk about, I call it spirit. I like that you call it soul. I like, anyone can call that that universal force or energy within them whatever
Yeah.
they like. I always like to tell people that I feel that there are, at least four bodies that we have inside of ourselves. We've got our mental body, our thoughts. We have our emotional body, whether we're happy or sad or angry. We've got our physical body, and then we've got that soul or that spirit body, that energy that's connected to the whole, that energy that holds all the worlds together, and we have access to it. And it's never in need of anything. It always it has nothing to fear because it lives on
Right.
beyond this lifetime. So it doesn't have any fear. So if we're caught in our mental body or we're caught in our emotional body and we're caught up in something that is uncomfortable, a circumstance, a situation, something we're afraid of, it is possible to step into that spirit body or that soul body, even though we're in a circumstance where our mental or our emotional body could be upset. We could slide into our spirit body if we can get out of our thoughts and out of our emotions for a moment. And that is possible. You mentioned breath work. I talk about meditation all the time with customers. I talk about exercise. That's getting your heart rate up. That's changing your situation very quickly by changing your physiology inside of your body, changing your hormonal response, giving yourself an opportunity to get out of the thought crisis that you may be in or emotional crisis that you may be in, release some of that hormone, and then bring yourself back to breath and clear focus. And if you can get out of the mind and get into the spirit and get into the soul, we can actually navigate through whatever situation we're in, and we don't have to be reacting in a negative way necessarily all the time.
Well, I always say, the most important thing is to learn to become the observer and to learn to observe all of our bodies. And the yogis actually speak of 12 bodies. Some speak of 10, others of 12. So there are, we have all these different bodies, and all is always happening in all of them all of the time. It's just, where is your awareness? And that the greatest teaching is becoming aware that there is an observer inside of us that we can call upon, and that can observe our state of mind, that can observe our state of emotions, that can observe our physical state and so forth, our spiritual state, with equanimity. And it does, because it's so easy in this whole spiritual and self-development realm, it's very easy to bypass. And, there's a lot of focus on positive thinking, whereas positive thinking is actually spiritual bypassing. Because if I am simply repeating positive affirmations, but I am not acknowledging that inside of me there is a destroyer, there is a part of me that is actually wanting to destroy me, because there's a part of me that believes that I am not worthy of having all the things that I am positively affirming, then no matter how much I positively affirm, I need to first acknowledge that there is a destroyer inside of me. So that's where then awareness comes in. Awareness without judgment, so that we can bring together all these various aspects that are living inside of us and have compassion for the various sides within us, because only through compassion can we cultivate love. And when we cultivate love for all of who we are, that is when we can grow out of our negative patterns.
So we have to have awareness and acceptance of something before we can even begin to love it. I always say that to people. You've got to put it on the table and accept it. You've got to see it and become aware of it before it's even possible to begin to start loving any part of our life.
Absolutely, yeah. Because otherwise the darkness, and the darkness is it's not a bad quality. It's simply the dark energy or the negative forces, which is not good, bad. It's yin yang. Otherwise they start running our lives, because it's always our weakest link, our unacknowledged stuff that runs inevitably our lives. And so that's why I always tell people, if you bring the willingness to see what you are not acknowledging, then you can bring it into the light. But if you want to bypass it, it inevitably starts running your life.
Interesting. So, many people are, myself included for sure, are suppressing emotions or kind of dark sides or shadows of ourselves, and not addressing them. And then by pushing it off to the side, we're actually empowering it in our life and allowing it to run our life, rather than exposing it, putting it out on the table. And you're suggesting that the detoxification process, the fruits, the live plant-based foods, the fasting, the breath work, the meditation, and even the plant medicine addition, massage, physical treatment, and the plant medicine is the way to kind of bring the whole self into integration. You're into whole self integration and
Yes.
addressing the entire person as a full being to manifest total health, total happiness, total joy, total freedom in the life can be a reality.
Absolutely. Yes.
Uh,
Yes. So
and
it
it's
is.
something.
It's all about integration. It's not even about perfecting. You know, a lot of coaches, I find they're very focused, you know, it's this whole rah rah rah, let's be perfect, let's optimize. It's not about that for me. It's about bringing everything into one cohesive being, and that when we love all of our parts, and especially our shadows, we inevitably start thriving.
Very nice, very nice. Excellent. So, and each of us is an individual, and so to say that they need to do something specific is kind of maybe challenging for any one individual. But if they are to just bring out the best in of themselves, is what each
Yes.
person needs to do.
Yes, and then, you know, it actually goes back to know thyself. Because when you truly know yourself with all your shadow, all your vulnerability,
And
all your
accept that.
power,
And accept
and
that.
accept
Yes.
that, and have a clear picture of yourself that is not inflated, not deflated, that is correct,
That's real. That's
that
real.
is real, then you become untouchable.
If you love that person, if you can embrace and hug that person and give love to that person and know that that person has divinity within it, and it's been created perfectly by creation, and really not loving that being is really not loving creation. So we really need to embrace that whole thing.
Yes, yes, absolutely. So it's as simple as that, and yet the way there, as we know,
is
is
not
complicated.
is not easy. Well, you know what, Alexandra, we've been talking for a while now. I don't want to get too lengthy on this call, so I'm gonna end our call here today. Now,
Yeah,
it's been wonderful to speak with you and get some insight into what you do as a coach in South Africa. And I hope some people will, from my contacts, will reach out to you for some guidance. Thank you very much for
thank
sharing the
you,
time
thank
with me.
you. Thanks. Well, and we have things that we're looking to collaborate on.
I'm
So
looking forward to that. Yes.
me too, because I love your whole background from the fitness and bodybuilding, and you know, it's again, it's all about integrating all this beautiful knowledge into serving more and more people.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, John.